Okay, this chunk, guys, this chunk is not really that bad. I have done it. I'll do one. You can do the rest. So let's do number 40. They're saying f of x is this and g of x is this. They want you to find f plus g. Well, f plus g is simply adding them up. This plus this. Done. F minus g is simply subtracting them. Take f, which is radical sign minus x, and plus 5. Why plus 5, guys? When you're subtracting, the sign changes. And I'm going to find the domain later in 1 second, okay? F times g is you multiply everything. And you can just do it like this. And f over g, you take your f and you divide it by g, done. And you can write that g is not equal to 0. You can write it on the side if you want to be nice and professional. Okay, so with regard to domain, this is I'm going to verbally tell you what the domains are. We just did number 40, guys. The domain of this will be everything except for x cannot be negative. When x is negative, you're in trouble. So for all of this, okay, the domain is going to be, I'm going to write it right here. 0 is okay or above because of the radical sign. Okay, this one is a little tricky for the domain. Why? Because there is an x minus 5. 5 is a bad guy. 0 or above is okay. It cannot be negative. So I'm going to start with 0 or above, but I have to pull out 5. So how do I do that? I'm going to say 0 is okay, all the way up to 5. And I'm going to subtract subtract 5, add it with union. So take a look, guys, how the division function, when you're dividing, you have a denominator. You can't make the denominator 0. That's why you're writing g is not equal to 0. So the domain for the first 3 is very simple. For the fourth one is always a little more challenging. I'll pause it just a little bit, okay? Just making sure I'm recording. I think I am. So guys, I'm just going to do one. And if you ask me, I'll do more. I don't mind, but they're very repetitive and there's not a whole lot going on. Adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing two functions is just doing those. And we have done how to find the domain many times today. So you're going to try some of them on the before your final. Okay, moving on, guys. Moving on. You have to tell me, could you do that? Could you do that? Okay. So guys, this is somewhat, it's not a new topic, but it's a little more challenging. We're going to do composition of function. Okay, then we're going to find the domain. And they want us to do f composition g. That means I'm going to start with f. I'm going to do a couple of these. Okay, I'm going to do 67. Okay, I'm going to start with f of x. But inside, I'm going to write g of x. I'm going to show you a few steps. But g of x is 1 over x. That's what it says. I'm going to go to my main function. Okay. I'm going to replace it with 1 over x. So I'm going to, and I have to do some algebra. That's why you did some of these things in the previous sections. And it's going to be a little bit of work. So see what I did. Instead of this x, I wrote, let me change it. Well, unfortunately, I can, this goes here. So far, so good. Okay, I found it, I'm done. And you have to enter it nicely. But I have to find the domain, number one. And in order to find the domain, I really have to simplify it, and you have to simplify it on the exam. This is too messy. So on the side, in a separate color, I am going to find this first, 1 over x plus 3. The denominator should be clean, should be just, one line. So how do I do that? Remember, guys, we did it in the past. We want to have the same denominator. I multiply both top and bottom by x. Now that I have the same denominator x on the top, I write this. Now, I'm going to write here, come back, write in green, 2 over this red stuff is 1 plus 3x over x. Now, when you have a fraction in the bottom, remember, guys, you can flip and multiply. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to flip the red x. That's going to be on top. Bottom will be 1 plus here. That looks much better. Now I can nicely calculate the domain. Remember, guys, I have to find the domain, and the domain will make, I have to make sure the bottom, let me erase this nicely, do it nicely. I have to make sure the bottom is not 0. So I'm going to set it as 0. I'm going to use orange ink. I'm going to set it as 0 and solve for x. And I'm going to say 3 of x equal to -1. So x is -1 over 3. So x is -1 over 3 is the bad guy. I don't want it in my domain. So what's my domain? Do it right here. My domain is everything from -infinity, comma, 1 over 1/3. And I don't have a lot of room, but I'm going to put a union symbol here. -1/3 to positive infinity. You can say it in English, all real numbers, and you have to say it very clearly. It has to be accurate. All real numbers except for -1/3. Or ideally, if I say write it using interval notation, you have to write it using interval notation. These corner ends have to be correct, and the union must be there. I'm going to pause there just a little bit, guys, okay? I'll do a couple more here. It's the height of this section, okay? These are hard. All right, guys, let's move on. They're very, very similar. Okay, let me do one more. Okay, let me do one more. I'm doing 69. Okay, I can find g of x, but they want us to find f of x. I'm going to do it very slowly. F of x. Instead of x, I'm going to do g of x. That's what composition means. But g of x is 4 over x. Okay, fine. Now I'm going to go back and replace this x and this x with 4 over x. How do I do that? Well, I have to do it very carefully. 4 over x instead of x. 4 over x plus 1. And the bottom here, I'm going to do it in green on the side. 4x plus, instead of 1, I can write x over x. And that makes the top 4 over x and the bottom x. And that's a good thing. And you have to simplify it on the exam, okay? I will say simplify your function. Otherwise, you won't be able to find the domain to begin with. And I'm going to write 4 over x. Now you have two fractions. You're going to flip the one in the bottom. And good news is you can cancel x and x. And what do you get? You get 4 plus x. So once again, you will give me this as your answer, not this. Okay. Now that you have it, you can easily find the domain. Who's the bad guy? -4 is a bad guy because replacing x with -4 will make the denominator 0. So what's your domain? I'm going to take everything except for -4. Done. So it's now repetitive. We did 2, right? We did 2 of the hard ones. I'll give you something very similar to 67, 68, 69, 70 on the exam. You have to find the composition of my 2 functions that I give you, and you have to find the domain, and you have to simplify them. So that kind of concludes, our current section. If you have any questions, we wrapped up 2.6. We did everything. The plan is next class, we will start 2.6, which is tomorrow. Now, I won't record anything. It's being recorded here. It's not kicking me out yet. So we have a short class today. If you want to leave, that's totally fine. If you want to hang around and talk to me, you want to see not your exam per se, I can't show you because it's still a class. If you want to say, could you do that problem? Could you do that problem? I'll use this time for that. So I'm not going to start the next section today. Okay, it's a little hard. This has to sink in. Okay, if this doesn't sink in, the next section builds on this idea. You want to go home, practice some of the MATLAB problems, do some of the homework problems, maybe watch the video. So here's what I'm thinking, guys. There's no need to just record this quiet session, okay? I'm gonna jump out. I'm gonna physically come back to see if you have any questions. I'm gonna do some work on my computer. I will be available, but I'm gonna stop this session so that the recording will be downloaded and we can upload it. There's no need to make other students go through this silence, all right? See you either next session to take your questions, or see you tomorrow. Bye.